Thanks for tuning in to My Valley, His Victory, hosted by me, Mackenzie Smith, where I interview Christians who love the outdoors and have walked through valleys in their lives. In a world of highlight reels and surface-level relationships, we all have faced hardships. I believe our experiences can be encouraging to others if we have the courage to be vulnerable. 2 Corinthians 1 says, "The Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." My goal is to inspire you to come to the Creator through His creation and connect you with Christians who have been through similar experiences. I pray that this podcast encourages you if you are in a valley and pushes you to share how God has turned your past valley into His victory. On today's episode of My Valley, His Victory, we have Danielle Reents. She is a community college counselor, wife, and a lover of all things outdoors, especially national parks. Together with her husband, Carrie, they have visited 30 national parks in the past 5 years since Danielle was diagnosed and went through treatment for triple-negative breast cancer at the age of 31. Since her diagnosis, Danielle has been growing in knowing what it means to trust the Lord and find her strength in Christ. Danielle also currently leads the Women's Connection team at her home church, co-leads a biblical cancer care group, and is the advisor for the hiking club at her college. She grew up and lives in Kingsburg, California, near Yosemite, Sequoia, and Kings Canyon National Parks, but loves exploring and seeing all of God's creation. Thanks so much for being with us today, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I know I told the listeners your bio, but why don't you go ahead and just share a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I grew up in Kingsburg, California. It's a small farming town, so everybody knows everybody. Most of my best friends are people I've known since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So I love that aspect of it. Super close with my parents and my sister. And I work really close to my home, like 15 minutes on country roads. And I'm at the college where I work, Reedley College. And yeah, I love life with my husband. We've got a dog, a cat, and they keep us busy, and there are fur babies. So yeah, and between work and being a wife and taking care of our pets, I like to hike, obviously, and just explore different areas. We love to do road trips, and we do bigger trips too, but I would say weekend warrior type of stuff where we get out there and explore new places is something that we love to do. And we're really blessed to be close to the Sierra Nevadas and all kinds of national parks. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that your town is really small and quaint and kind of countryside. You know, when I think of California, I think of LA and the big cities and the hustle and bustle. And so it's always cool to meet someone that has like a totally different experience of California.
It's the exact opposite of that. Like we play Swedish music. It's a Swedish founded town. And so we literally play Swedish music downtown, and we have some good restaurants, but yeah, it is very small, and it's a beautiful town, but yeah, it's the exact opposite of Los Angeles or San Francisco.
Yeah. So I know that you said, I'm not super familiar with the area that you live, but you said it's near Sequoia, Kings Canyon, and Yosemite. Which one is it closest to, or is it kind of right in between all three?
It's closest to Sequoia and Kings Canyon, so it's about an hour and a half drive, maybe an hour to get to like the entrance, and then about 2:15, 2:30 to get to Yosemite. So we love to do just quick one-day hikes or maybe go backpacking. We tend to do a lot of our hiking club activities up there where you get to know which trails are good for beginners, which ones are a little bit more advanced. After sharing my hikes on Instagram and things, people are always like, let's go hiking. So, just talking to people about like, what are you looking to get? Are you wanting to get great views? Because both of those places have that. Are you wanting to see waterfalls or just have it be more of a chill hike? So I really like that part of hiking and like getting to help more people experience it and start to feel more comfortable with it. Because I know some of my students tell me it can be a little bit intimidating, like to go out into nature on your own, So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely can be for, someone that didn't grow up doing that and didn't grow up in that experience. I know, that was my experience. And so it was always intimidating starting it, and you just have to teach yourself a lot. But it's so cool that you do a hiking club and kind of teach people that at the school that you work, because what a great resource for people who are wanting to get outside and don't have any experience.
Yeah. And we actually have a forestry program. So, like, if you want to learn more or think that this is like a passion that you want to turn into a career, you can you can do that here too. So I think they should give me a recruiting fee or something. But yeah, we've got backpacking classes, mule packing classes. Like, this is a good place if you are interested in being outdoors. Hiking club is just the start of it.
Yeah, I feel like I need to come and do college all over again, because that was nowhere near my experience. And
Yeah.
I'll be one of those old people who just take like 1 or 2 classes and
Yeah, that's what I do.
learn the new things.
Right.
So I know it's probably a hard question, but between the 3, do you have a personal favorite?
I do. Well, I go to Sequoia and Kings Canyon the most, just because it's closer, it's easy, I'm super familiar. But Yosemite is just so special. I mean, it's beautiful and it's so diverse. Like, this last summer with all of our snow melt and the extra rain that we got, like, you could go at the base of a waterfall and feel like you were in a rainforest, right? With all of the mist and just like that little microclimate there. But then, like, during the winter, to go like snowshoeing and just be in these vast snowfields, it's just gorgeous. So yeah, Yosemite is my favorite. It is my most favorite national park. I mean, I can't help it, but it is.
That's okay. I think we all have one. If you've been to multiple, and you said you've been to 30, so I know I asked if it was your favorite out of the 3. Is it your favorite in general?
In general, yeah. Rocky Mountain was just cool. Like, we happened to go there when the elk were really active, so just our experience there was really, really special to like hear them making their calls in the morning. And then we actually like had to scramble up on some rocks to get out of this little herd's way on a trail. So like, that was a really special experience just to be in Rocky Mountain at that time. It was beautiful, like, to see the animals up close, on the trails. But yeah, I would say hands down Yosemite if I have to choose one.
Hey, that's okay. I hold a very special place for Yosemite because that's where I met my husband.
Oh,
and so,
nice.
Yeah, we met on top of Sentinel or Centennial. I don't
Sentinel
know.
Dome. Yeah.
Yep. So met him there. And so that's always a fun memory of a really cool place.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So obviously you grew up in this part of California. So is hiking and backpacking, are these things that you grew up with? And are those kind of your favorite outdoor hobbies? Or how did you get started in this world?
Yeah. So I grew up camping. I camped a lot with my grandparents just because my parents worked a lot during the summer. Being in ag, a lot of people's parents, that's their busy time. So my grandparents would take us like camping in a trailer, me, my sister, and my cousin. And so I've always been outdoors. We would go horseback riding up in the mountains. We would camp a lot, go to the local lakes and go boating. But I really didn't get into hiking until I lived for a short time in the Bay Area, like the East Bay. And it was right when we first got married and I was kind of on my own. I was working part-time at a college up there. And so I found this group of people through meetup.com, and they were all retired people who, like to hike during the week, but I had days off. And so, yeah, they kind of adopted me and they would call me things like youngin and stuff. But that's where I really got into hiking. So very different than like the Sierra Nevadas, but they have beautiful rolling hills and just tons of trails. Like the trail system on the East Bay side is beautiful. And you can just go for hours and hours, and then you end up next to a big city. And yeah, it's really cool how that works out. But yeah, that was probably when I first started to really enjoy hiking and got comfortable going out on my own or meeting new people and going out. So when I moved back to Kingsburg after being up there for about a year with my husband, I didn't have my meetup group anymore. So I had to start finding other people to kind of go with. And Reedley College was a perfect place to do that. I took the backpacking class, wilderness survival. I just found other like-minded people to go with. And so, yeah, that's my favorite thing to do outdoors is just get out there and hike. The last couple of years, I started to get into snowshoeing because I am not really a like skier or snowboarder person, and most people are. But I was tired of feeling like I couldn't do anything during the winter in the mountains, so I started to get into snowshoeing and really, really loved it. So,
yeah. Very cool. I love that you found it in kind of a place that you wouldn't normally think, being in that Bay Area, and then kind of just went back to your hometown and maybe experienced it in a totally new way.
yeah.
And so that has to be kind of cool to go back and just kind of live in a different world, I'm sure, a little bit in your hometown. I don't feel like that happens very often for people, to experience their hometown in a new place or in a new way.
Right. And it's neat to have some people who I've known have lived in the Kingsburg area most of their life and maybe have never been to Sequoia or Kings Canyon, or it's been a decade since they've been to Yosemite, and to be able to be like, hey, let's go, and just help expose them to that. And then, I mean, it sounds cliche, but so many people end up saying like, I didn't know this was in our own backyard. And it really is. So yeah, just helping them feel more comfortable with it and getting out there.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Wild that there's people that live there and don't go.
But it is. Yeah. People travel from other countries to come here.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously you get to experience these really cool places and you live in a really awesome place, but kind of talk to us a little bit about how the outdoors plays a role specifically in your relationship with Christ.
Yeah. So I think when I'm outdoors, I just feel and see so many different aspects of Christ, right? Like I experience his peace, but also you get to see his power and his might, like the creation that God made for us, I just think it's both of those things simultaneously, and I think that is so neat. Like when I go out on a trail, you get to see so many little details and see his creativity. And there's a psalm verse, I think it's 96:12, that talks about like being jubilant and that the fields be jubilant and all the trees sing for joy. And I just like that just resonates with me, So when I'm outdoors on a hike or just, really enjoying one of our parks, I just find so much peace, but also like to be able to be active also brings me a ton of gratitude just because of what I've gone through the last 5 years. And so, yeah, I don't know, it's a mixture of things that I've been able to see and learn through Christ, through hiking. And it really was a place of refuge over the last 5 years, I would say. With COVID and going through like chemo and different things, like my immune system was down for a while. And so to not be totally cooped up, I would go out and spend a ton of time outdoors and just feel, yeah, like I wasn't being restricted or held back, and just, yeah. So it was a really a huge blessing during that time.
Yeah. Do you have a story that you can share with listeners about a way in which God has revealed himself to you through the outdoors?
Yeah, there's a couple of particular stories. So I just remember, so there's this one trail in Sequoia, and you come around this bend, and it just opens right up to this beautiful view of the granite and the mountains. And it almost like takes your breath away, And I just remember looking at it and feeling all of God's grandness, like whatever I can imagine, he's got something grander planned, and just having a moment there looking out at that and thinking, wow, look at, like, you designed this, but also you designed me. And just, like, I know how much he loves and he cares about us and how much he has put into the ones that he loves, right? And I was feeling that much emotion over a mountain range. And then just to think, you love me so much more, like that was just a really, really special moment. I remember getting emotional, and I was with my friend who is also a believer, and she was like, I'm so glad we get to experience this together and grow together, and just, yeah, it was really, really special. And then I love to see all the little details. Like I love to hike, but I also like to stop and take pictures and look at things. So when I stop and see something, whether it's a plant or a bird or there's quite a few deer, it always brings to mind some of those verses like the deer panting for water and how our soul longs for the Lord. And yeah, just a lot of those verses tend to come to mind while I'm out there because it's peaceful and it's quiet and it's just a chance to spend time meditating on his word. A couple of my longer hikes that I've been able to do, I'll write down a verse and like put it in my pocket. So if my mind does start to wander back to like, oh, I need to do this when I get home or whatever, I whip out that verse and just have a really good time like meditating and praying like, Lord, what do you want me to learn from this? Can you help me to learn what you want me to see through this verse? So yeah, I love to think about the verses and just see what comes to mind while I'm out there in the outdoors.
Yeah. I love one that you said that about putting a verse in your pocket. I think that's a really, really good idea. And I know I definitely need to do that and, take that time to meditate a little bit more in scripture. But I love the moment where you said you kind of came around that corner and you were just, taken aback by the beauty and just really thought through the process of like God loving you and creating you and, just like he created the mountain. And I think like that, whenever you said that, it came to mind that like that your love and your awe and your like excitement, whatever the word you want to use is, of that creation is like how God feels about us.
Right.
And he like, I think a lot of times we get down and we're like, oh, but we're these bad people and we're, this and that or the other, and I'm a sinner. And it's like, no, like that's the way God looks at you.
Yeah.
And I just love that you mentioned that. Like that was a sign of how much he loves us and, that we're his creation too. And what a good picture of and a reminder of that that's the way that God looks at us.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So obviously you live in a really awesome area of California, but for someone who maybe lives in that bigger city like LA or San Francisco and wants to get outside and connect with God, what is some piece of advice that you would give to that person?
Yeah. So, obviously seeking out other people who can help expose you to that. And, that could be through like your church. Maybe you find somebody else who's like-minded. Or if you don't have those opportunities to make those connections right now, wherever you're at, I would probably recommend just going to like your local park or going for a walk in a particular neighborhood. Like I know when we were up in the Bay Area, there were some places that had these beautiful lined streets. And yeah, you were in the middle of a city, but beautifully tree-lined streets. And you could just go and find a bench or whatever and sit there and just like we talked about, like be in awe of that tree that God created, right? Or look out on a landscape if you can find like a place within a city and just see all the little details and the creativity of what he's made. A lot of the times people don't see the Central Valley where we live as being exactly beautiful. There's a lot of ag, lots of dirt fields, but like the Bible talks so much about fields and has so many different parables about like farming and things like that I think you can really find beauty in some of those places where it might not be quite so apparent when you look at it through the lens of God's word, And so like we did a study in 1 John and there was the verse about like, I am the vine of life, and now I will never look at a grape vineyard, even if it's like totally dried up. I will never look at it differently again. I'm always going to remember that. So I don't know, connecting the word of God with whatever your surroundings are, I think is a way that people can, connect even if they're not in an outdoor area. So,
yeah. No, that's a really good word. I feel like there are, the Bible talks about all different things and you can most likely find one of those in your town somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's a really, really good way to look at it and something I've never really thought about or advice we haven't gotten on this podcast yet. And so I always love those fun new pieces of advice and practical ways to connect with God, even if you live in a place that doesn't seem so beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. So switching gears into the title of this podcast, My Valley, His Victory, would love for you to share a season of wilderness or a valley that you went through and just what God maybe taught you or prepared you for in that season.
Yeah, when I was 31, so this is just over like 5.5-ish years ago, well, first, how it came about was very much like God intervening. I wasn't doing monthly breast exams, like I was healthy, always had great physicals, was active, and a friend reached out and talked about how a former colleague's wife had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember the exact moment because I stopped and did an exam and felt a lump and went to my doctor. And she was just going to order an ultrasound. And she said, I prayed about it and I'm going to order that mammogram too. Okay, really was not that worried. Went to the mammogram, had the technician and the radiologist come in and say, like, look, this is concerning. We're going to give you a biopsy. Still not really worried. I had heard about other people having biopsies and them being fine. But within about a week and a half, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. Stage 2, triple negative, which the stage 2 part, so it can be anywhere from stage 0 to stage 4. And it's based on like different things, like has it spread to any other parts of your body or to your lymphatic system? What's the size of the tumor? Different things like that affect the stage. And then there's 3 main things with breast cancer that they look at, like is it estrogen positive, progesterone positive, HER2 positive, and mine was not positive on any of those things, which in one way I thought was good, but also they just don't have additional treatments for it, like hormone therapy or different things that they could do to treat it. So, and all the genetic testing came back fine. So, like was left with a ton of questions of why and how did this happen? But really, like from the time of getting diagnosed, and I got the call while I was at work, I just had so much love surround me. Like it was like God sent angels in human form. Like I'll never forget the hug that my coworker gave me because I was at work and just how comforting that was, and then to go home and tell my husband and have him have like total confidence, like this is going to be okay, and then to tell my parents. So I do not want to diminish that was hard. Like it totally was. It was awful. Moments crying on the bathroom floor type of thing, like those things happened. But also looking back now, I see all of the love and the kindness that he really provided during that time. So yeah, that was the start of my valley. My valley included having a port placed, which was like a little device where they could administer the chemo. So that way it wouldn't like ruin some of my veins when I would go in for treatment. It included some fertility treatments because we don't have children yet. And then chemo. So 5 months of chemotherapy and losing my hair, losing eyebrows, eyelash, lots of things. But again, like looking back, I think about we had a head shaving party where my friends bought me beautiful wigs and hats and scarves. And like, we didn't want it to be a time of sadness. We wanted to celebrate what God was going to provide throughout this, because we knew it was coming. And yeah, then mastectomy surgery, which was, tough, but not as awful as I imagined. Great, prognosis at that time. That's when they removed the rest of the tumor. And then I did a little bit more chemo after that, just as a precaution. And so technically I just had my 5 years cancer free because that's when they removed the tumor. So I just had that at the beginning of May.
Woo-woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, party.
I know.
Celebrate.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely celebrate. My mom brought over balloons and my friends celebrated with me. So it was just, that trial was very challenging and difficult, but to look back and be able to see all of the ways that he provided and all of the ways that people loved on me and were just, they just did what God commanded them to do and to love on me during that time in ways that I never even expected, fundraisers. A friend from high school said, like, the Lord told me to reach out to you and I want to run 100 miles and do a fundraiser. And no joke, the amount that he raised covered our fertility treatments by $100. So like thousands and thousands of dollars plus $100, like provided exactly what we needed. So yeah, just amazing, like to see his hand throughout that whole thing. But yeah, that's the valley. And I would say he's brought me through that. And I have grown and learned so much from him during that time. And just like to see how he drew me closer during that time, to be able to look back on that has been such a blessing, because not everyone gets to look back and see like what comes out of a trial. But that's pretty apparent to me, is that he drew me close.
Yeah. One, I'm just, I'm sorry that you went through that, and that, you had this cancer and had to go through the surgeries and the chemo, and I on no level can begin to understand what that was like. So just wanted to, say I'm sorry, but also how kind, of God to really just surround you with all that love, because this could have been a really defining point, for you. And so for you to be able to look back, and I know that from the time we very first chatted, you just said, I just look back and I just see all the good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't look back and I, see the hard times. That doesn't mean that they weren't there, but it's not what you choose to take out of that season. And I think that that's so important. But I think that it's also so cool that you had so much good, or the best, that you could have during that season,
Right.
with having so many people surround you and love you and, just pray for you and all of that. But you said something as you were sharing this story, and I'm just, kind of curious. You talked about just like going through this and knowing that God was going to make it okay, and that, your husband said, it's going to be fine. And then, you said you guys were hanging out and you just had the confidence that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I would just love for you to elaborate a little bit more on that, and just kind of how you were able to have that confidence, and just maybe what that looked like.
Yeah. And it's probably important to clarify, like when I say I'm going to be okay, I mean like eternally, right? Like that eternally, I'm going to be with my Father. I'm going to be with Christ. That's what I mean by going to be okay. I didn't know physically if I was going to get healed, right? Or some people have side effects from having lymph nodes removed and different things like that. Like, I wasn't sure of those things, but I was confident that God was going to continue to draw me closer to him, and that this would be used for his glory. So that's the part where I think it's really cool to see it. You don't always see that come about. But I also had people pray. Oh, the prayers, I had quite a bit of anxiety at certain points, mostly after finishing up treatment. But to ask people to pray when I didn't have the strength, I guess, and just to literally feel God provide that, to go from having heart palpitations, almost feeling short of breath, and to send out a cry for people to pray, and to have them pray the most beautiful. I mean, some of those prayers, if they would text them to me or email them back, voicemails, I save all of those because they were just so beautiful. And that's where, like, I think just the community through like family, friends, my colleagues were amazing. My church, like having all of those people surround me with prayer helped to give me confidence. There was one particular time where somebody that I trusted quite a bit talked to me, or told me, not talked to me, about how I wouldn't be experiencing the anxiety that I had if I truly believed. And just the amount of people that came along and said, that is not true, that is not biblical. My pastor, so many mentors, like if anything, God used that lie to shore up my faith, because I came out of that feeling so much stronger that, hey, I know that this is not what defines me. I'm defined by God, and that is it. And so, Yeah, that's what I mean when I say going to be okay. Because the physical part was important. Yes, I wanted to be able to be healthy and healed, but that's where I had my confidence in being okay, was that he was going to never leave me or forsake me, and that ultimately it helped to give me that eternal perspective that I didn't necessarily have before.
Yeah. No, I think that that's so important, because I think in those moments, whenever we get a big diagnosis or, something happens, we're very quick to think of, this earth and what's happening here, and to just know, like, it's going to be okay. Whether that means, I know that I'm for sure that I'm going to heaven and that I have a relationship with God. Like, if you're to the place of having that confidence with the Lord, like, I think you're in a pretty good place. And to just have that, because I think so often, in the world we live in right now, I feel like we have, I'll say wishy-washy Christians. I don't quite know the right word for it, but if you were to ask them, if you died today, would you go to heaven? Like, I think a lot of people would say that, I'm not sure. And so to have that confidence and to be able to stand in that and know, like, no matter what, it is going to be okay, whether that's on this earth or whether that's in heaven. Like, that's just such a good perspective to have, because it is the truth. And I think so often we think solely about what happens here on earth, and I know I need that reminder all the time.
At my cancer care life group, we always talk about like the perspective that we have now, and just, yes, we want to be here as many days as the Lord wants us to, like, just to be here and to be able to do his work and to love on people and bring people closer to him. But our perspective has also changed, in a really beautiful way that sometimes will only come out of going through a valley like this. So,
yeah. And I also loved what you were saying about, as you were going through this, texting people, emailing people, and asking them to come alongside you and pray for you. I think so often when we go through things, we kind of keep them inside and we don't necessarily like invite people around us. And, I think as the body of Christ, that's what we're designed to do. And so, I think we need, and it's, biblical to like let other people intercede on behalf of us. And so, just love that, I would say played a huge role in this, and the way that you invited people around to pray for you and, to intercede on your behalf and help you, that's just shows so much humility. And yeah, I just think that that's so amazing that you just, was willing to take all the help that you could get. It was just like, I for sure cannot do this alone. Like, I need anybody that's willing to pray for me, please do so. And so I'm sure you go back and cherish some of those voice memos and things now. That's super sweet thing to keep and, look back on.
Well, and even I think about that now when somebody's like, I just don't want to be a burden, or I don't know how to ask for help. Like, what if they don't have the time? And it's like, oh, just do it. Just let somebody serve you. It is blessing you, yes, but it also is really blessing them. How many times do we really go to the Lord and pray deep, deep prayers to him when there's not something going on in life, right? Like, yes, we should be in the Word, we should be praying daily, but like, if you tell me your child is sick and you ask for prayer, yeah, you're letting me go to the Lord in a deep, deep, meaningful way, right? So that's blessing me too, to be able to have that relationship with my Father, and just, yeah, it was humbling. Certain parts were humbling, especially when I was bald and not looking too cute to have people come over. But, I look back and I have this beautiful, vulnerable, real moment with these people. And yeah, it really shored up a lot of my relationships that maybe wouldn't have been so deep or meaningful to be able to let them in this way. So,
yeah, I think vulnerability is the gateway to connection. And so it's like you think you're close to people, and then you are vulnerable with people, and then it's like, oh, you realize that you were actually pretty far from that person. And so, yeah, no, I love that. And I think that, we've talked about this a ton on this podcast, but people think vulnerability is weakness and, that it's going to push people away. And it's like, no, it actually does the complete opposite.
Right. Yeah.
So for someone who maybe is dealing with, a really hard diagnosis, maybe it's not cancer, maybe it is, or maybe just, some other health related thing, what, advice or piece of word of encouragement would you offer to a person going through a similar season?
Yeah, probably some advice I would give is just seek out others to help you through that, to seek out the Lord, whether that's through diving into his word more, listening to different sermons. I feel like for some people it might be a time when they pull away, and maybe not in an ill-intentioned way, right? It might be, oh, I'm so busy dealing with my problem or going through this that I just, it kind of gets put on the back burner. And I feel like that is the time when he can really, really do some work on your heart, do some work on your thoughts. I'll never forget Philippians 4:8, because I used it as a checklist for my thoughts when I would start to spiral. So just to lean in and to let him provide for you during that time. And then I know this might not always come easy. It might not even happen in our lifetime, but God can use those trials, whatever it is, to bring him glory. I think of some of the hardest times that I've heard of from having other breast cancer sisters pass, right? Those are hard times for their families or to have to deal with. But to know that God can take something like that, something like his son going to the cross, and use it for the good of us and to bring him glory. I mean, just to land on that encouragement and to focus on that can be so encouraging when you're going through these times.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that and reminding us that if he can use that for good, he can use anything that we think is unique or hard under the sun.
Yeah. I mean, it might feel like I'm going through the worst thing right now, right? Whatever it is. But it isn't the worst. It isn't the worst thing that has happened, because Jesus went to the cross and paid the price for our sins. So he did that because he loved us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So good. Well, thank you, Danielle, so much for sharing your story and, willing to come on this podcast and hopefully, use your story to encourage somebody else. And, I know that you're working with other cancer survivors or maybe even patients. I know you do something with a support group. And so, I just always love whenever people take things that were really hard for them and they, encourage others through the process and just have the willingness and the vulnerability to do that. Because I think that, like you're saying, God can use anything for good, but we also have to be willing to share and we have to be willing to talk about it. And so I just want to say thank you for being here and for sharing this very hard season of your life.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for hosting this podcast and having a place for us to talk about this, because I know it's not something that always comes up in all of those different conversations, but it is something that can help us form real relationships with each other and ultimately connect and bring the glory back to Christ. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so for those listeners who maybe want to follow along with you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I am on Instagram. I am Danielle Reents, but my username's DNN21. Most of it is going to be hiking, things like that, occasional dog content. But yeah, also talk about cancer and how God has used that in my life. So yeah, most of it's going to be hiking content, but you'll get some other glimpses as well.
Hey, we're all here for the dog content. What kind of dog?
He's like a golden retriever mixed with something, maybe a lab, or I don't know. He's got the golden retriever ears, but is more like broad shouldered and a little bit thicker. So we're not sure exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Does he go, is it going to be dog hiking content?
No, he is not a good boy on the trail. Or maybe I wasn't a good dog parent in teaching him how to be a good boy on the trail, but he's too easily distracted and runs around. And
what's his name?
Tucker.
Tucker. So sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you again, Danielle, so much for being here and for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of My Valley, His Victory. If you or someone you know are interested in being on this podcast, please email myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com.